Right now on the line with us is Jenna McLaughlin. Jenna is a surveillance and national security and tech reporter with The Intercept, the website theintercept.com. And you can tweet her at The Intercept or at Jenna MC_LAUGH. Jenna, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being with us. And my apologies for the delay there. We had a computer crash while we were... Anyway, Vault 7, CIA hacking tools revealed. 8,761 documents. You want to tell us about this in overview?
Sure, absolutely. So the overview is that an unknown party has disclosed a large number of documents belonging to a technical unit within the CIA to Wikileaks, and Wikileaks has published a large amount of those. Some of them are still redacted or potentially to still be published. And the large amount of them are detailing sort of hacking capabilities that the CIA has that they use against their targets, essentially.
One of the things, I've got a couple of clips here from Julian Assange's press conference. I wanted to play them and just get your response or let you riff on them. This is about his talking about the CIA having a massive operation in Germany, specifically in Frankfurt. Here it is.
At the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt, our publications reveal is a CIA hacker base that people go there from the Central Intelligence Agency. They're given instructions about how to get past German customs, and they operate out of that hacker base to attack targets within Europe, within Africa, and within the Middle East.
So, and he later on said that there are about 2,000 people working out of that place. So what do we know about this?
We honestly don't know too much more than what Julian disclosed. I didn't look too specifically into the Frankfurt location, but being part of a publication that's worked so heavily on the NSA disclosures from Edward Snowden, it's not surprising to realize that the intelligence agencies have bases all around the world. Would
they locate it in Germany so that they could spy on Americans without violating U.S. law, or does that? I mean, why Germany? Is it? I mean, Germany is now, with Brexit and everything, it's going to become basically, presumably, the financial capital of Europe.
I don't think that there's necessarily any evidence or indication that they're using Germany as a place to spy on Americans. That's not really what the documents say. I mean, sometimes signal intelligence, things like that, they work better depending on where you are in the world. So I think that that's probably the simplest explanation. So probably just good internet infrastructure there, that sort of thing. Pretty much.
Yeah, remarkable. Here's his comment about the Geneva Convention, that these are actually tools of warfare, and we need to have another convention to determine the use of them. Here
is the quote. Assange. Just as the Fourth Geneva Convention has long protected civilians in times of war, we now need a digital Geneva Convention that will commit governments to protecting civilians from nation-state attacks in times of peace. And just as the Fourth Geneva Convention recognized that the protection of civilians required the active involvement of the Red Cross, protection against nation-state cyber attacks requires the active assistance of technology companies and companies like Wikileaks, which can provide information about these attacks.
It sounds like he's also reaching out to Apple and Microsoft and saying, we want to be allies with you. Speak to all
right. Absolutely. And obviously there are a lot of different equities here. I think what Julian is getting at, and something that a lot of people have been talking about, is that the world of cyber kind of conflict is something that is not very well regulated. It's not something we have international norms to surround. There have been certain publications that address it, like the Talon Manual, but it's not something that we do have a Geneva Convention to establish. It's going to be challenging to do that, especially because a lot of these attacks are hard to attribute. And, Apple and Google have already come out with some statements. I tweeted them talking about how a lot of these vulnerabilities, some of them are things that they've known, and if they didn't know about them, they're working hard now to address those flaws.
Yeah. He talked about how there's this difference between giant scoop data collection, which presents a problem with encrypted data, which is increasingly the norm, versus point-to-point data collection, where you grab it at the computer where it's being generated before the encryption is performed, or at the computer where it's delivered after the decryption is performed, and that requires malware or virusware or whatever you would call it, a cyber weapon that embeds itself into the operating system of the computer and is not visible or trackable. And that increasingly that's being done on an industrial scale. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So, I mean, like you said here, there's a difference between mass surveillance with these systems designed to tap into the backbone of the internet, the data that belongs to technology companies to scoop up massive amounts of information, versus using these very targeted attacks to access devices belonging to high-value targets. Usually, these specific attacks are incredibly expensive. There are companies that work to mine vulnerabilities in code and develop these exploits and sometimes sell them to parties like the U.S. government.
Right. And what about the concern that, and Assange addressed this in his press conference, the concern that these zero-day and other vulnerabilities, these that have been discovered in some cases by the U.S. government and apparently not shared with Microsoft and Apple and other companies, that these could be sold to hackers.
Right. That's certainly a possibility, or they might be discovered by hackers. There's a chance in that. There was actually a process set up by the White House in 2014 called the Vulnerabilities Equities Process, where agencies get together and essentially talk about whether or not certain exploit capabilities that they have, whether they should share those things with technology companies in order to have those holes patched, or whether or not it's better to hold on to those capabilities to infiltrate certain targets. So the idea there is, will this bug be discovered by other malicious people who want to use it against the other millions of people using this product? And it's hard to say necessarily without data how often these bugs are found at the same time. I think RAND just published a study suggesting that sometimes it takes as many as 6 years for people to discover the same high-value bug. So if that's the case, maybe it's not so horrifying that somebody like the CIA would hold on to a very specific bug, but it's hard to tell without more information.
Is privacy dead?
Well, it's quite a big question. I mean, judging from this specific leak, I think people need to remember that while the CIA has these incredibly advanced capabilities, it's not like they're really using them on average Americans. It would be very expensive for them to do that, and they could risk losing them all the time. We don't really have evidence that they're doing it to completely obliterate privacy. That's the thing with targeted attacks, is that it's not mass surveillance. So I don't think that that's necessarily something that's implicated with this story specifically. But I mean, you could debate that question for a long time.
Yeah. What is, I mean, he made the point several times that these are basically tools of cyber warfare, not just, ways to hack into somebody's, basically to read somebody's diary from afar. To what extent is that actually the case? That we're looking at tools that could be used to bring down governments, that could be used to bring down infrastructure, that could be used to destroy people's lives if they ran afoul of a particular state, not necessarily the U.S. government. Presumably, if these tools are available to the CIA, and now they've been apparently since last fall, available on the internet. In fact, Assange said that, they were floating around several different sources. Other governments have them. Other hackers have them.
Sure. So, I mean, it depends on the tool that you're talking about. There are plenty of exploits that are used purely for espionage to access a device and exfiltrate information. But there are also other attacks, many of them public, that the CIA didn't discover or create itself, including the Shamoon virus, that has the ability to not only exfiltrate data, but also just completely destroy the computer itself. And those types of attacks are more military in style. So it's something that like Cyber Command would do versus the NSA.
Yeah, and to what extent what is the state right now of how setting aside the CIA for a moment and just talking about just general viruses, malware, hacks, cyber crime, all that kind of thing. How common is that right now? It seems like everybody has antivirus software and whatnot. What are the odds that your computer has been compromised?
How common is poor cybersecurity? Because it's a vast problem. Cybersecurity is certainly something that a large number of pieces of software, hardware, different devices are suffering from. I mean, when the people first designed the internet, it's just incredibly challenging to create such a complex and sophisticated system without a few tiny flaws, a few mistakes that end up being exploitable. So it's going to be a running problem. But then there are certain products that are more vulnerable than others, that security isn't necessarily the top priority of those things. I mean, we saw the Miri botnet that happened earlier this year, where some of the Internet of Things devices just don't have any security at all. They don't have a default password, things like that. So it's a really broad issue with a lot of different details, but cybersecurity is an issue.
Should we be concerned about talking around a TV or a speaker system that is smart, or for that matter, a smartphone, or you know, a toaster that you know, is wired into the Internet of Things?
I mean, if you're concerned about the CIA spying on you for whatever reason, if you're actually thinking that the CIA has information to glean from you, I mean, sure, but that's probably not the case for the average American. I think the real concern would be criminals using those devices and their poor security to mount an attack like a botnet or something like that.
What about companies using those devices to gather information that they can simply sell on us? You know, we become the product, and then
sure,
the loss of privacy associated with that.
Right. And I think that that's a whole nother aspect of it that people are sort of voluntarily giving up. I mean, companies should certainly be transparent about what type of information they're collecting. But very often it's the case that people submit to those terms. Yeah.
Yeah, it is quite remarkable. Jenna McLaughlin, surveillance and national security and tech reporter over at The Intercept, the website, theintercept.com. You can tweet her at Jenna MC_LAUGH. Jenna, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Really appreciate your insights. We'll be back.